The government says, in fact, there are about 16,000 Canadians known to be in Lebanon at the moment. An evacuation of that scale would be the biggest in Canadian history. The last time the federal government had to do anything on that scale was actually the last evacuation from Lebanon in the summer of 2006. More than 14,000 Canadians back then were evacuated. Peter MacKay was Foreign Affairs Minister at the time, and he's with us live now. Mr. MacKay, good to see you. Thanks for making the time.
My pleasure, Vassy. Good to be with you.
I'm wondering, as you were hearing the government issue that warning today and all the kind of back and forth in the past 24, 48 hours about the possibility of an evacuation, we know now that resources are being moved into place, for example. If immediately your head went back to 2006, and if so, what was going through your mind as you watched them make those announcements over the past few days?
Yeah, it's been there a lot, Vassy, over the past 7-10 days as this whole tragedy has unfolded, and it was a very, very challenging exercise, to say the least. It was mentioned around 15,000 Canadians evacuated, and the numbers went even higher. There was estimates that there were up to 40,000 Canadians or dual citizens, as we later discovered, and it was a scramble at the Department of Foreign Affairs. It was then called. It was an all hands on deck. We were trying to, and in fact, in some cases, competing for the necessary assets to get Canadians out of the harbor of Beirut, complicated further by the fact that there was a blockade around the harbor. And so a lot of diplomatic communications happening between both Lebanon and Israel to try to work around those blockades to get citizens out. Now, it was the suddenness of that particular eruption of the conflict that made this a particular challenge for the department. And when I say department, there were, of course, national defense, public safety. It was a coming together of many ministries to make it possible. But that's not to underscore at all the challenges of this particular potential evacuation. And let's not forget there are people in Israel as well who are attempting to get back home. And as the minister herself just said, commercial options are available right now, and those options should be taken first.
Do you, I guess, think it's prudent at this point to prepare for almost an eventuality, treat it as an eventuality that though you're warning Canadians to take commercial flights, there are going to be some who don't, and the possibility of the war expanding to this front is so real that you kind of got to get ready, even if it doesn't end up happening? Would you kind of be doing the same thing?
Absolutely. And in fact, I dare say the department has, at its availability, much more practical response. There is a center, in fact, in Canada, in Ottawa right now, that contemplates these type of evacuations and the bringing together of the various players, actors, ministries. That came about, in my view, as a result of what we had to do in 2006. And so those options, plus the communications with ministers on the other side, and our professional public servants and military, they were extraordinary in that moment and were working tirelessly to get Canadians out. There were special forces involved because of the proximity to the Israeli-Lebanon border and trying to get people out on the ground. And so a lot of lessons learned, Vassy, I think that will be applicable. And you're right, they should be looking at contingencies, bringing people together, playing out various scenarios, doing everything they can to ensure the safety of Canadians. And I'm sure they are.
I mean, the big issue seems to be, from the conversations I'm having in the background, is that once, let's say, Hezbollah gets involved, they essentially control the airport there. And so, like you've experienced, you had to use the sea. It's not an easy thing to do. How likely do you think that that's going to pose a real challenge? And how do you anticipate, what resources, I guess, do you anticipate we might have to circumvent that?
Well, the Navy may very well become involved. We have ships at sea, but it takes much longer to get there. In our circumstance, the border had been closed. The harbor itself also had a blockade. But more challenging was the fact that the airport had been bombed and closed, and the airspace over Lebanon had been closed. And so that made it really a single option. And when I say we, the entire government effort, aided spectacularly by people like Peter Beam, who's now a senator, went out and rented assets. In this case, it was a ship called the Blue Dawn a ferry that we had to use to get Canadians from the port of Beirut to the Cypriot. And that involved, again, other countries. We had to work with both the Greeks and the Turks to make that possible, and land planes in Cyprus and get Canadians there via ferry. So it's, as I said before, it really is an all-hands-on-deck effort. And the fact that it's been done before definitely proves that it can be done. And having all of these various ministries and departments working together, public servants who I suspect were there during that time and can bring that experience to the forefront, I think it is something Canadians should have confidence in their government and in being able to get their loved ones back home safely.
I just have a few seconds, Mr. MacKay, but it's not in that vein that I guess I would ask. And as you point out, there are major differences between the situations. Primarily, that came, as a complete surprise. This one has now been underway for 16, 17 days. If there is one thing after you went through what you did, and the government at the time went through what it did with that evacuation, that sticks out for you that you would offer as a piece of advice to those tasked with carrying out the potential for this one, what would it be?
Well, it's not surprising, Vassy, that the communications between departments is critically important. We saw that as well in the response to Haiti and the disaster that happened there. These departments are joined at the hip and work very closely. The professional public servants are in regular contact, but this requires a particular degree of intensity and the communications with the countries involved as well. The fact that the minister has been to the region, the fact that there is professional public servants, ambassadors, and their staffs on the ground, that as well, I think, is a particular key ingredient to all of the moving parts that are involved in an anticipated evacuation such as this.
Okay, Mr. MacKay, I'm going to leave it there. Appreciate your insights this evening. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Vassy. Thank you.